But that was actually perfectly timed. Generic intro into that goes me. We're back with another Game Theory FNAF video. Today we're doing FNAF I Solved Ruin Security Breach Good versus Evil. Now I don't think that this video was out before Ruin came out, because I think Ruin came out just a couple months ago. I think it was like the end of July or early August when the DLC for Ruin came out, or DLC for Security Breach that was known as Ruin came out. So I don't know if he got it right or wrong. I think Ruin absolutely tore through the fourth part of the Ultimate Timeline, which I absolutely love those videos. I watched them at a perfect time, because I literally went from watching that to watching the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, which I thoroughly enjoyed so much. I love that movie because I was just like telling my girlfriend the entire time, because she doesn't know anything about it, and I'm just like, oh, that's gonna happen. That's who that is. I was like, oh really, they did that? It was such a good time. You check reaction to the part 4 of the Ultimate Timeline. I'll leave that right up there. Also, link down below in the description, also to place my channel with all the other Game Theory FNAF reactions going in chronological order. But did you enjoy the FNAF movie? I really enjoyed it. It was definitely a movie that was made for the fans. Like, if you're not a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, or you didn't know the lore and stuff like that, like if you watch Game Theory about talking about FNAF, you're gonna enjoy the movie. I really enjoyed it. My girlfriend enjoyed it. She loves spooky stuff, so she absolutely loved it as well. Even though she literally only ever played with me for Sister Location, which I live streamed, link down below in the description, on my birthday. It was a crazy time, but I'm excited to watch this. I don't know anything about Ruin, so I'm gonna see what changed with FNAF Ruin DLC coming out. But let's go ahead and jump on into it. Alright, we're gonna see what Ruin did 4 months ago, which that would have been early July. So this is before Ruin came out, so we're gonna see if he was right about that. Also, I watched FNAF movie. It was so good. I loved it. It was definitely made for the fans. And also, Nat Happy, it was crazy.
It's the best of times, and it's the worst of times. I mean, on one hand, FNAF fans be eating good this month. There's books, there's a teaser for the movie, there's a trailer for Security Breach's Ruin DLC. Heck, there's even a brand new
I reacted to the trailer, and then I never uploaded or edited
I'm recording this episode. It is all super exciting stuff.
Help 1 and 2,
I hope you're prepared to engorge yourself in lore like Chica consuming a pizza. It is literally the year of FNAF. Which
it might be because the movie
2023, and that's the year of FNAF 3.
Is the movie performing well box office wise?
Honestly, the only thing they're missing from this year is some sort of haunted attraction. But on the other hand,
would be cool.
There is chaos in the wider theorist community. Buried in this landslide of new material are a lot, and I mean a lot of very significant lore drops that feel unusually explicit for this franchise. Hints to the origins of Henry, revelations about secret AI programs controlling.
It's kind of crazy how accurate the characters were to the movie.
46. But here's the thing: no one can actually,
because like they showed Henry Emily, I'm like,
everyone recognizes that there's been a lot of very important stuff that's being
revealed. He was in the background. I was like,
every online FNAF theorist that I've seen has taken the clues and wound up with a different solution to the puzzle.
He's still not a robot.
That's not a big issue. That is the beauty of theorizing: to reach your own conclusions, to make your own predictions, to come up with your own personal headcanons as part of the internet hive mind's attempts to work together and solve a common mystery. There are going to be people that you agree with and people that you don't, and you know what? It's great either way.
Yeah, everybody has an opinion.
Kind of gotta sort of figure it out. What we're talking about today is some major stuff. Everything that's coming out right now feels like it's trying to guide us into what the plot of Security Breach was meant to be. And now with Ruin coming out in July and building off of that initial game, we've got
early July,
demanding that we solve things, and quick. Our window.
I think he might have been pretty close.
I'm here to catch you up on all the major reveals
and
the ensuing controversies before throwing my purple hat into the ring on what I suspect
purple.
me.
Why is purple hat? That's supposed to be like
episode, friends. Good news. I think
bunny.
we've been on the right track the entire time. Bad news. I don't think the wider FNAF community.
Part 4 didn't go well. I don't believe. I think Ruin.
Battle. So, are you ready, theorists?
I got mistaken for him at
Halloween.
I was 4. Somebody thought I was Lean Nights. I haven't had pizza since 2016. Okay.
Let's set the stage. It's April. All of Team Theorist over here has just finished slaving away on our massive timeline for the series. We've done it. We are on the beach, coconut drinks in our hands, eager to take a break from the franchise until Ruin's release later in the year.
Psych.
But nope. Scott had himself some other plans. He smacked those beverages clean out of our hands and released 3 new books: Submechanophobia, The Bobby Dots Conclusion, and Nexi. Now, normally that wouldn't be too much of a concern, right? Books tied to this franchise have been coming out for years. It's just part of the content treadmill at this point, and it's not like they tend to add a whole lot. Only one in like every 6 stories is even remotely lore relevant, and even then the connection back to the games only exists if you squint at it. But oh no,
not
friends,
these are deep.
Across the 3 books, story after story
all of
after
them
story seems
Scott
to have
just likes writing books, I guess.
And not only that, they're also much more direct direct in the way that the information is presented, with characters and events mapping largely one-for-one onto characters and events from the games. If you're not in the habit of reading these things, and
imagine know how to read.
why would you when I could just do the homework for you? What I'm talking about might be a bit confusing, so I'm just going to explain by way of example. In GGY, one of the 4 stories that set the internet on fire, a young boy named Greg, with brown hair and big brown eyes, is a master hacker who's been reprogramming the animatronics at Pizzaplex for evil deeds, including bumping off 3 school counselors that seem to be getting too close to the truth. He also has himself a habit of being really good at the Pizzaplex's arcade games, leaving behind his initials GGY at the top of the game's leaderboards. Now, compare that information to what we get in the games. There's a young boy named Gregory with brown hair and big brown eyes who seems to be Patient 46, a master hacker that's reprogramming the animatronics
because he's a
Pizza
robot
for evil deeds, including bumping off 3 therapist characters that also seem to be getting too close to the truth. He also has himself the habit of leaving the letters GGY at the top of the leaderboards at various arcade cabinets throughout the Pizzaplex. Now that right there, that is not counting animatronic pose and trying to match
really
striped
in
shirts.
the lead.
That is about as explicit of a one-to-one
he doesn't
parallel
barely
that we get for this
set
franchise.
the high score.
So
He
when the story also
destroys
reveals that
the high
Greg's
score.
nickname is Rab, aka Dr. Rabbit, you stand up and take notice. And you know what? The internet sees it. They recognize the connections and how important the books have suddenly become. No longer am I out there on my own little island shouting into the void about using the books to inform our speculation about the lore. Finally,
people
the internet
finally
agrees
accept the
with me.
books.
To me, this is a huge step in the right direction in terms of figuring out the wider lore of the franchise.
That's a very spooky forest.
Tiny little problem with this. No one can quite agree just how seriously to take this lore. After years of
just kind of like the movies.
There's suddenly been a massive swing of the pendulum the complete other way, where now many pockets of the FNAF community vehemently believe that these most recent stories are fully canon with the games. In other words, we're no longer talking about an alternate universe where events are similar to the games, but with slight differences. Oh no. Now the debate is all
what are we talking about?
what
The
you read in
same
the books
things
also
happen,
happened in the
different
Pizzaplex
stories?
that we play through in the games.
Different
so
sides?
before we dive into
I don't
that
know.
can of worms, let's just talk about the stories themselves. I already filled you in on GGY, which means it's time to talk about the other 3, which tell themselves a connected timeline of events, starting with the first, the Mimic. This is the one that everyone has been losing their collective minds over. This story tells the tale of Edwin, a genius inventor and single father, and his hyperactive son, David. Basically, Edwin is overworked. Years ago, he sold his struggling robotics company to Fazbear Entertainment, who now has him hard at work turning their, quote, weird costumes into entertaining robots. With the first
But is that supposed to be Henry?
Bright yellow chick.
Because I believe it was Henry got bailed out by
in all
William.
the best and worst ways possible. It means that he's sweet and excitable, but it also means that he's moody and demands.
But why would
a
there
lot
be
of time and
Gregory,
attention.
but then
2
they
things
changed the
that
name?
Edwin does not have.
Edwin.
So to fix his problem and get himself more work time, Edwin creates a piece of software known as Mimic 1. Using some spare robot parts, he makes a legless endoskeleton that's able to copy everything that David does. Basically, this thing's an AI that's using David as his training data. And while Mimic 1
there's a movie
starts
about
by
that.
merely copying David, pretty soon it's able to respond on its own, independently. And David
it's
loves
learning.
this thing, which means that Edwin is finally able to disappear into his work. Everything seems to be going well until tragedy strikes.
They literally
And
said, "Here,
unsupervised
kid,
David
here's a
runs
mirror."
out to the middle of a busy highway and is killed. Edwin
Why?
is devastated.
Why'd
He
you run
takes
into a
all his
highway?
rage out on the Mimic, this robot that continues to behave like his son, infusing the metal of the bot with pure agony. We then flash forward in time to Edwin being gone, and the Mimic roaming the halls of his abandoned home, a brutal killer still in possession of David's childlike tendencies. So, does any of that
Why is
sound
it a
familiar?
killer?
Because it should. It's Henry Emily, a genius inventor who helped create
I'm pretty
the
sure
robots
he was
Fazbear
specifically in the
Entertainment,
movie, and he
a man
looked
who also
really
happens
similar
be
to
a
that, I
single
believe.
father whose only child dies in a tragic accident when they decide to run outside. A creator whose first project was Chica. Now, that alone would be plenty of connected dots, but the story continues to hammer home the parallels between these 2 men. In past videos, I've talked a lot about Henry's signature animatronic design, the hinged jaws that we see on the original animatronics, as well as the Rockstar animatronics. Well, guess what? This is how Edwin decided to build the Mimic. Quote, under the eye housing, Edwin had welded in place a hinged jaw. Speaking of Edwin's robots, do you know what Edwin's first business project was? He made robotic vacuum cleaners, presumably like the ones that we see in FNAF 6. Edwin and Henry even share the same sandy brown hair color. But the other big parallel that the story gives us is when Edwin destroys the Mimic. The way this event is described is very similar to when Henry built the final Charlie Bot from the Fourth Closet novel. Here's how it's described in Tales of the Pizzaplex. He could almost feel his murderous thoughts pouring through his muscles, transfusing through the metal into mimic systems. And here's what happens when Henry builds the Charlie Bot after her death. Quote from that book. When Henry began to make the Fourth, his despair turned to rage. He seethed as he soldered her skeleton together, pouring his anger into the forge where he shaped her very bones. It was not Charlotte drenched in grief. It was made alive with Henry's fury. In both instances, we have men who have instilled their creations, animatronics that are literal stand-ins for their dead kids, with the pain and rage of loss. If that's not a solid connection, I don't know what is. Even from a timeline perspective, Edwin being Henry makes a lot of sense. In the Mimic, they specifically call out that he's 24 years old. After the death of his son, he disappears. But then,
he's 24 with a son?
Pizzaplex, this one
guess
called
was a different
Storyteller,
time.
we meet up with Edwin
People used to have kids
40
like
years
through
later,
20.
at the point that he decides to return to the Fazbear franchise to sit on their board of directors. Again, the books make a very specific point to call out all these dates. So why? What's the big deal here?
I don't know.
If Edwin is truly the parallel for Henry, Henry lost his daughter Charlie in 1983. We're not exactly sure when he leaves the company, but we definitely know when he comes back, 2023. As evidenced by the numerical code in FNAF 6. 40 years later. A perfect match to the time frame that the books have laid out. In short, Edwin has to be Henry, which means, in a very cool twist, our early franchise timeline was almost perfectly correct. In that video, I said that William Afton's company specialized in hand-sewn mascot suits, and that Henry, when he was brought in, was the one responsible for turning those suits into animatronics.
Yeah, and Henry saved William, but it was backwards, which people said in the comments.
When I said that one of the two founders had their failing company get bought out. I was just wrong about which one. In that timeline video, I suggested that Afton made Fazbear Entertainment, but eventually ran out of money and had to be bailed out by Henry. But as this story shows, it's actually the other way around. Henry was ultimately the one that was bought out. And in one final parallel between the books and the games, the story actually describes the Fazbear exec that gets Edwin to sign away his business as Portly, which connects all the way back to the Silver Eyes, where Afton was described in a similar way.
Portly?
Quote, Afton was as robust and lively as Henry was withdrawn and shadowy. He was a hefty man who had the ruddy geniality of a financially shrewd Santa Claus. Okay, cool, so we've got some confirmation on some early parts of the franchise, but what does any of this mean for Security Breach? Well, that's where the second Edwin story comes in, the Storyteller. In this one, we rejoin Edwin 40 years later. Because of his importance to the early days of Fazbear Entertainment, he now sits on the board of directors.
Makes sense.
A fact that does not land too well with the current head of the board, Mr. Burrows. Get it?
Joe Burrow?
Burrows, because everyone's always connected to rabbits. Anyway, to cut costs at the Pizzaplex, Mr. Burrows decides to lay off the entire creative department.
The entire thing?
With a generative AI that's capable of creating new storylines for all the characters.
Wow.
Basically, this thing is like ChatGPT on steroids.
Kind of like the new Call of Duty
understandably
campaign.
Upsets Edwin, who apparently has gone from engineering nerd to creative heart of the company. But he's not just a WGA member that's upset about some Writers Guild's rights. What makes matters worse is the fact that Mr. Burrows isn't using just any AI, he's installing Mimic 1, the same program that Edwin created. The one that was trained by his son 40 years prior. When they install it, it even comes in the form of his son's favorite toy, a white tiger head. And here's where things start to get real
sick,
crazy.
actually.
This AI controls everything in the Pizzaplex. It
everything?
runs through a large central tree of wires that are connected through the walls, even tapping into things like
which
the
are
animatronics
for
themselves.
some reason.
In fact, once the Mimic 1 program gets installed, the behavior of all the animatronics starts to change from their normal personalities into something that's a bit more like a 4-year-old. They start to become possessive. They get into tug-of-war matches over toys. They
sounds like a 4-year-old.
Cry. David is somehow getting infused into everything that this AI touches. Eventually, Edwin attempts to shut the Mimic 1 program down, but he dies in the process. However, in his final moments, he attempts to communicate with his son inside the AI. You see, in the Mimic story, Edwin watches David communicating with his robot buddy using a made-up language.
Wait, what do you mean read by? Is it an
David
audiobook?
and Mimic had been doing all manner of odd little drawings that were surrounded by markings that looked vaguely like hieroglyphics. Edwin then uses this same language to communicate with the Mimic software at the end of the storyteller.
So that's what isn't there a wall that's like
with
that?
Odd stick drawings and strange symbols that were not at all familiar to Mr. Burrows. Squiggles, squares, loops, triangles within triangles. So why is this story such a big deal right now in the FNAF community? Well, everyone knows it's important, it's just that no one can truly settle on what it's trying to say. Which means it's time for me to do my best to try and break it all down. Now, I've already mentioned the parallels between Edwin and Henry, but what that also suggests is that Edwin's son David may just be an analog for Henry's only child, Charlie.
Yeah,
not
which
that
would
they're
make
one and the
complete
same or
sense.
following the exact chain of events, but rather that where David goes in the books, we should be looking for Charlie to follow in the games. And in the story, the Mimic 1 AI that was trained using David winds up controlling the Pizzaplex and all its animatronics via an intricate system of wires. This, to me, is the book suggesting that we should probably be looking for Charlie to be doing the same thing in the games. And wouldn't you know
in
there
the puppet,
is a lot of evidence
with
to suggest
the
exactly
stripes.
that. Throughout Security Breach, there are wires wires everywhere. Black
That's
and
supposed
white
to be the
striped
puppet, which
wires
was
that look
possessed
very
by
similar
Charlie.
to everyone's favorite possessed puppet, Charlie.
Not my
There are
favorite,
also
my
the
least
staff bots
favorite.
roaming around looking like a twisted version of the puppet.
Oh my God.
We also see several unexplained Nightmare-owned plushies hidden in strange locations throughout the building. Again, suggesting that an angry version of Charlie may just be at work within the walls of the building. During my complete timeline, I suggested that the reason we were seeing so much puppet imagery throughout the Pizzaplex is because Charlie's possessing the building poltergeist style. Just like the house in that movie is possessed by angry spirits, the Pizzaplex is haunted by Charlie because it's built on top of the location of the FNAF 6 fire. Basically, her physical form may be gone, but her
I'm surprised
is still gonna haunt the building
that in the
Afton
movie. Actually, no, I'm not gonna spoil anything.
This story confirms that I was close about the what, but not necessarily about the how. Charlie is still very much here, but it's not a haunting, it's technological. And look at this. The wires are even formed.
Or maybe it doesn't have to be
technological.
Maybe it's just analog.
Exactly the way the Mimic's wires are described to run through the Pizzaplex in the book. Just like David's consciousness infected everything in the Pizzaplex during the Tale story, so too is Charlie infecting everything in the Pizzaplex of the games. But that's not all. Remember that in the book, Edwin uses an elaborate code of symbols, sticks, and shapes to communicate
which is
with the
on
sun
the wall
inside of the Pizzaplex. It's designed
which are those
as an
little
elaborate
symbols?
Code
Yeah.
of triangles within triangles. That right there, that is the wall code in Security Breach's secret room. Remember that one?
But
If
that's
not,
where
here's the
Henry
abbreviated
died?
translation.
Isn't that also a Charlie door?
The breath. They hunt now, drawn to life. The storyteller here is giving us a clue that this wall code, these triangles within triangles, they were written by Henry. How? When? Not sure.
When he was dying.
We hadn't even considered him as a possible person to have written this because he was supposed to be dead in the FNAF 6 fire. But if you look at the text with him in mind, the pieces all fit. Henry did build the breath. He was the creator of the animatronics. And in all stories about Henry, we hear about him repurposing old robotic parts. He is breaking and mending them. But midway through, this coded message
like
starts
a genius.
to switch tones. It starts giving instructions. Quote again, dodge, duck, flash, shoot, crawl, run, crush the vile band. Your life, your aim will save those with soul. He's teaching someone their mission. He's giving some robotic AI their instructions, just like Edwin was trying to communicate with the AI in the book. It is their task to save those with soul. But look specifically at the verbs that are written here, especially shoot and flash. This one has to be talking to Gregory.
Why? Because that's something you do in Security Breach?
The vile band of the Pizzaplex, all of those actions are things that he performs in the game. He is the only one shooting with the Faz Blaster. He is the only one flashing with the Faz Cam.
Oh, okay. I've never played Security Breach. I almost played it for birthday, but I'm really glad I didn't because it sounds stressful.
Within triangle code.
It looks stressful.
The protector has to be Gregory. I know. I can't let Robot Gregory go. I get it. But how else do you explain this? No one else is flashing and shooting. And remember, the story GGY confirms to us that Gregory is patient 46, whose secret therapy tapes are played right next to where this code is in the very same room. Everything in this one room is screaming that the message is for Gregory, written in a code that the books tell us is reserved for robot brains. But this then raises two major questions. First, how could I say that Gregory's a robot when we see him in GGY as just a kid at school? And secondly, GGY makes it clear that Gregory is a villain, hacking into the animatronics and using them to kill people.
Apparently, all three of your former therapists have gone missing, or two of them are missing. One of them was found dead. The woman's body was pretty messed up. It looked like it was mangled by machinery.
Gregory's pen name for a large portion of the book is Dr. Rabbit, for crying out loud. If that doesn't
I don't know what that's
by the way, I'm
supposed to
also
mean.
working for Afton. I don't know what does. He calls himself the wizard's most favorite apprentice. So how can I say that he's working for Henry when it's very clearly being told to us that he's also working for William? Well, first off, we never actually see confirmation that he's a human in the books. In fact, we largely get the opposite. Gregory is actually described in the book as, quote, an unfamiliar kid who looked a little lost at the start of the school year. So there's no past with this kid, no growing old together with a group of friends. He just appeared out of nowhere one day.
Just like a robot would.
His friends do something
People say that about me.
He reacts in a very robotic way. He cocks his head and he has a weird pause in his behavior. Is that a lot to go off of? No. But also nothing about him explicitly says that he's necessarily human, or that he's just the reluctant follower of Afton. But obviously the bigger question here is how? How can you be both a protector bot and an agent of Afton at the same time? This is also a question that's raised in the books. If GGY is saying that Gregory and Glitchtrap are in control of the animatronics, but then the storyteller is saying that an AI version of Charlie is controlling the animatronics, who's actually in control here? Both of these stories feel crucial to understanding Security Breach's lore, and yet they seem to contradict each other.
I don't know what Ruin's gonna do, because this doesn't even really talk about Ruin, does it? There you go. But that was actually perfectly timed.
Glitching Techno Rabbit. Glitching between two colors, green and purple. This effect is known as chromatic aberration, which is when the lens of the camera is unable to focus the different colors of light into the exact
That's a red camera.
Usually you see this sort of thing with red and blue.
That camera's,
sometimes
I
red
think,
and green. Purple and green
$40,000?
is not usually the natural
$30,000?
color combination for this sort of effect, which means that
car.
it's trying to tell us something. And this isn't the only time we see it. If you go over to securitybreachtv.com, which has been the go-to location for all online teasers for these games,
I didn't even know that was a website.
has the steel wool logo
in
down
those
in the
two
corner,
colors.
glitched again between purple and green. Not only that, they're reverses of each other. Not just reflections, but actually facing in opposite directions. Well, we know that purple is always going to be the villain color. It's evil. That is a given for this franchise.
Is purple?
But
I thought
green,
purple's supposed to be royalty.
Probably the opposite color, the hero color. And while it could represent Elizabeth with her signature green eyes, what I suspect is more likely is that the green is Charlie, the color of the security puppet's eyes, the color of the wristband that she was wearing the night that she died.
That might not be that much of a stretch.
Within Gregory, and honestly within all of these
jump scares in this episode. I love that.
For both good and evil. Glitch Trap is in the code, obviously. He's purple, but there's also a force for good, Charlie, in there as well as green. And what we're playing through is a battle between these two to ultimately decide who wins. That's why the tiger head and the Tales from the Pizzaplex story has two differently colored eyes. It shows two forces at work within the same program. This also explains why throughout the game, the other animatronics are getting corrupted, but why Glamrock Freddy isn't. He's booted in safe mode. The storyteller establishes that all the animatronics are hooked into the computer network that controls the Pizzaplex. By glitching out and then rebooting in safe mode, Glamrock Freddy is separated from that system.
And that's why,
as well as
because he glitched out on stage
within it. And just like that, it all became crystal clear.
But I thought he's supposed to be Michael.
About two different sources of control over the animatronics in the Pizzaplex isn't because Scott changed his mind or because Steel Wool didn't get the memo. It's because Ruin is literally going to be a battle for control. The forces of evil, Glitch Trap, versus the forces for good, Charlie.
And
one who
let me guess, they're going to ruin the place. They're going to ruin the place or leave the place in ruins.
All to rest and protect those who can still be saved. And Gregory is stuck there in the middle. Both of them existing inside of him, like he says himself at the end of the trailer.
Good luck deciding that one.
Don't give up on me yet.
But hey, that's just a theory.
I don't know how close that is. FNAF community in May.
Watching. And hey, if you want to see more of my live theory crafting and reactions to the Ruin trailer,
4 months ago, it's
crazy. Over on the left. Might even get a sneak peek into some of the ideas that I'm using for an upcoming theory. Or if
and when we get caught up with FNAF theories, we're going to continue game theory videos.
Check out our theory on Amanda the Adventurer. As
I don't
always,
know what
my
that
friends,
is.
don't
Never
forget
heard
to
of that.
subscribe, and I'll see you all next week.
All right, next week will be the next one, which is going to be the, oh god, what is it going to be? Is it going to be FNAF, the AI Uprising Ruin? I'm not really sure when Ruin came out and when his first video on Ruin's going to be, but I will definitely react to that just like all the other ones. We're actually getting close to the end of the game theory FNAF videos, but I'm sure he's going to make a lot of the movie. I know he was also in the movie, which I know he made a video on the Film Theorist about that. Let me know if you want to see me react to that, because I have seen the movie now. Really enjoyed it. If you enjoy these videos, you will enjoy the movie. It's definitely a movie made for the fans, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you're subscribed to the future videos. I've been doing this every single week for over a year now, which is absolutely insane. I do read all your comments, so leave some down below. I hope I was able to make your day just a tiny little better. But until next video, take care and cue the music.
We were playing